I still remember the exact moment my hand started trembling so badly that I couldn't even grip the steering wheel. It was a Thursday evening in early September of 2021, the kind of late summer day where the air still carried warmth, but the sky was already shifting into that burnt orange that tells you fall is creeping closer. I had just picked up takeout from this small Thai place we liked on the edge of town. Pad see ew for me, red curry for her. A habit we'd had for years, but the bag sitting on the passenger seat barely registered in my mind, because my brain was stuck on the weight of a single object, heavier than anything I had ever carried. The hidden phone I had found in her purse just an hour earlier. I can still see it. Black, older than her usual phone. No case, nothing fancy. Just tucked beneath receipts and a pack of gum she always kept in her bag. At first I thought maybe it was an old one she forgot to throw out, but then I pressed the side button, and the screen lit up. And in that glow, my world as I knew it started to crack. Even before I unlocked it, something inside me knew. It's like when you hear a song from your childhood, and before the first chorus even hits, you can feel every lyric in your bones because you've sung it 1,000 times before. I didn't need the phone to tell me the truth. My gut was already screaming it. But my hands, my stubborn heart, they couldn't resist. And the moment I saw her wallpaper, some generic picture of a beach, not our dog, not me, not even something she'd usually choose, I knew this phone wasn't for her normal life. This was for another one. A secret one. But let me backtrack, because to really understand the punch of that moment, you have to know who I was before it, who we were before it. My name's Daniel. I'm 36 years old now, born in '89, which means I grew up with Saturday morning cartoons, dial-up internet, and the golden age of pop-punk band. I live just outside of Richmond, Virginia, in this small 2-bedroom house that we bought back in 2016 when the housing market still felt kind of attainable. I used to think that house was the start of everything for us. The kind of place where you build roots, maybe raise kids, host Thanksgiving dinners with too much food and awkward family small talk. Back then I believed life had finally steadied after years of chasing jobs, moving apartments, trying to figure it all out, like every millennial was forced to do in their 20s. Her name was Emily. She was 3 years younger than me, 33 now, though when we first met she was 24 and I was 27. We met at a 4th of July barbecue, one of those overcrowded beer-soaked parties, where someone's uncle inevitably sets off illegal fireworks, and everyone pretends they aren't worried about the cops showing up. She wasn't supposed to be there. She had tagged along with a friend who knew the host, but I swear, from the second I saw her across the lawn, I felt like the world tilted, not in some cheesy rom-com way, but in that quiet, grounding way, where you suddenly feel like you're standing in the right place at the right time for once in your damn life. We fell fast, like most people do in their 20s, but we lasted, which felt rare in a world where everyone was swiping left and right like dating was just another game on your phone. She was funny, sharp, and had this energy about her that made even grocery shopping feel like an adventure. We went through all the stages: cheap dates, late-night drives blasting music from her old Honda Civic, moving in together, adopting a golden retriever named Murphy. Life wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Looking back, I can see the cracks that I ignored, tiny ones at first. She was always on her phone, but so was I. Who wasn't? She traveled for work a lot, but I told myself that was normal in marketing, and every once in a while she'd get this faraway look in her eyes, when she thought I wasn't paying attention, like she was standing in a place I couldn't reach. I chalked it up to stress, or just being tired. We all have moments where we drift, but now, when I replay those memories in my head, I realize those were red flags waving in plain sight, and I chose to look away. The pandemic years changed things too. In 2020 we were stuck at home together like everyone else. At first it was fun, baking sourdough, binging Tiger King, Zoom trivia nights with friends. But as months dragged on, I noticed she seemed restless. While I found comfort in the quiet routines, she seemed like she was suffocating. She'd disappear into the bedroom for hours on work calls, while I worked from the dining table. I told myself not to overthink it. God, I wish I had trusted my instincts then. The real unraveling, though, started in life was inching back toward normal. We started going out again, seeing friends, planning little trips. That's when I noticed how often she'd suddenly need to step outside to take a call or swing by the office. There was one night in July when she came home late, smelling faintly of cologne that definitely wasn't mine. I laughed it off, joking about how maybe she hugged one of her coworkers too close. She laughed too, but there was something in her eyes, a flicker of guilt or fear that stuck with me, and yet, I still brushed it aside. So that September evening, when I reached into her purse to grab her keys because she asked me to grab something from her car, and my hand brushed against that unfamiliar phone, something inside me froze. It felt like the universe had placed that object there for me to find, like it was daring me to finally open my eyes. Holding that phone was like holding a grenade. I didn't even have to unlock it to know it was dangerous, that it carried the power to blow up my entire life. I stared at it for what felt like hours, though it was probably seconds. My first thought was denial. Maybe it was a work phone. Maybe she was helping a friend. But deep down, beneath all the excuses, I knew. And when I finally pressed that button and the screen flickered on, I felt the air leave my lungs. I didn't unlock it yet. Not that night. I couldn't. My hands were shaking too much. My chest felt like it was caving. I shoved it back into her purse before she could notice, forcing a smile when she walked into the room and asked if I was ready to grab dinner. But from that moment on, nothing was the same. It's strange, the way your brain works in times like that. Part of me wanted to confront her right there, to hold up the phone and demand answers. But another part of me, maybe the more terrified part, wasn't ready to hear the truth. Because once you ask the question, you can't take it back. And once the truth is spoken, it changes everything forever. So I waited. I carried the weight of that secret in my chest, pretending life was normal while my mind spiraled. Every laugh we shared, every kiss goodnight, every mundane moment was now laced with suspicion. Was she texting him? Meeting him? Was every late night a lie? The house that once felt safe now felt like a stage, and I was the fool playing my part, while she lived a double life. And that's the thing about betrayal. You don't just lose trust in the other person, you start to lose trust in yourself. How could I have missed? How could I have been so blind? I didn't know it yet, but that phone would drag me down into a world I never imagined I'd be in. Secrets, lies, late-night revelations that would haunt me for months. That night, driving home with the Thai food untouched beside me, I stared out at the highway lights blurring past, and realized my life had split in two. The life I thought I was living, and the one I was about to discover. And once you've glimpsed the shadow of the truth, there's no going back. The days after I found the hidden phone felt like I was living inside someone else's skin. Everything looked the same on the surface. Morning coffee in our chipped blue mugs, Murphy's paws clicking across the hardwood floor, Emily humming absent-mindedly while brushing her hair before work. But underneath I felt this sharpness, like invisible glass splinters pressing against me with every breath. I became hyper-aware of her every move. When she left her regular phone face down on the table, I wondered who she was hiding from. When she laughed at a text, I tried to measure the sound. Was it the soft laugh she reserved for me, or the sharper, higher-pitched one she used when trying to impress someone else? Even the way she kissed me goodnight changed in my mind. Was her body there but her heart somewhere else? For almost a week I carried the knowledge of that hidden phone like a secret cancer. I didn't touch it again immediately. I didn't have the courage. Instead I circled around it, testing myself. I'd glance at her purse when she wasn't looking, my chest tightening like I was standing next to a locked vault filled with answers I wasn't sure I could handle. The breaking point came the following Friday, September 10th. Funny how some dates burn into your memory like scars. It was a long week at work. I'm in IT, which means I spend most of my days patching up servers and dealing with people who think turning something off and on again is rocket science. I came home exhausted, expecting maybe a quiet night, but Emily was already dressed up, makeup done, hair curled, heels tapping against the tile when I walked in. She looked stunning, in a way that made my stomach twist. She told me she was going out with coworkers for a happy hour. Nothing unusual. She'd done it before. Plenty of time. I forced a smile, asked her if she wanted me to heat up leftovers later, and she kissed me quickly, too quickly, before heading out the door. And there it was again, that scent. Faint cologne. Not hers. Not mine. Lingering in the air after she left like a ghost. I sat on the couch, staring at the blank TV screen, my heart pounding. That was the moment I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't keep playing dumb while my gut screamed the truth. I walked into the bedroom, grabbed her purse from the chair, and pulled out the phone. This time, I didn't hesitate. I sat down at the edge of the bed, screen glowing against my palm, and started trying passcodes. Her birthday, no. Our anniversary, no. Murphy's name, no. I almost gave up, until I thought of something so simple it made me laugh bitterly. 2034. And just like that, the phone on the screen blinked alive, and my entire body went cold. The first thing I saw was a messaging app I didn't recognize. Something discreet, not the kind you'd normally download unless you wanted to keep conversations hidden. I opened it, and there they were. Hundreds of messages, threads that went back months. At the top of the list was one contact, saved under just a first name, Chris. My chest tightened. The messages were intimate, flirty, detailed. There were pictures, some of her, some of him, conversations about nights they had spent together in hotel rooms, plans for weekends when she told me she was working late. My stomach churned as I scrolled, every line stabbing deeper. She hadn't just been hiding a flick. This was a whole other life, complete with inside jokes, pet names, even discussions about the future. One message, dated just 2 weeks earlier, nearly knocked the breath out of me. She had written, "Sometimes I wish I could just leave it all behind and be with you full time, but I don't think he'd ever suspect. He's too trusting." That was me, reduced to a pronoun, a shadow in her secret world. I don't know how long I sat there, phone burning in my hand like it was radioactive, my vision blurred with tears I didn't even realize were falling. My body felt like it was splitting in two, half of me frozen, half of me shaking uncontrollably. I could hear Murphy padding into the room, his wet nose pressing against my knee, whining softly as if he sensed something was wrong. When the front door finally opened hours later, and I heard her heels clicking against the floor again, I scrambled to shove the phone back in her purse. My face was hot, my eyes red, but I plastered on a mask just like I had been doing for days. She walked in smiling, cheeks flushed from wine, or maybe from him, and she asked if I wanted her to grab us some dessert on the way home tomorrow. I nodded, forcing a laugh, while inside I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, with no ground beneath me. That night, lying in bed next to her, was the longest night of my life. I stared at the ceiling, listening to her breathe evenly, wondering if she was dreaming about me or him, wondering how many nights like this she had come home from someone else's bed and slid into mine like nothing happened. The breaking point wasn't just the discovery, it was the realization that my entire reality had been rewritten. Every memory, every smile, every "I love you" we had exchanged was now suspect. Had she meant? Was she ever really there with me? Or just killing time until her next secret rendezvous? The next morning, September 11th, I woke up with the weight of it all pressing so heavily on me I could barely move. I made coffee, the same way I always did, but it tasted like ash in my mouth. Emily chatted casually about her day, completely oblivious to the fact that I now knew her entire secret life. I nodded along, but inside something was shifting. The trust was gone. The foundation cracked. I couldn't look at her without seeing the messages, the pictures, the words she had written to him. I told myself I needed proof, more proof, something undeniable, something that would strip away any chance of her twisting it, of her making me feel crazy. So over the next week I became someone I didn't recognize. I checked that hidden phone whenever I could, memorizing conversations, dates, times. I noted when she said she was working late, and cross-referenced it with the nights she texted him about hotel room. I saw pictures of dinners they had together while I sat home microwaving leftovers. Each discovery chipped away at me, but it also hardened something inside. By the time September bled into October, I wasn't just hurt, I was angry, furious. Betrayal does that to you. It burns so hot it could melt steel, but it also leaves you cold in a way you can't describe. The breaking point, the true breaking point, came one night in mid-October. She said she was going to a work conference in Norfolk for the weekend. I knew the truth. I had already seen the messages between her and Chris, planning the trip, the hotel reservation under his name. My chest ached, but my head was clear. When she left Friday morning, suitcase in hand, I stood at the window and watched her drive away. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel paralyzed. I felt something sharper, steadier, a need to confront, to stop letting myself rot in silence. That night I opened the hidden phone again, and saw her last message to him. Finally, a whole weekend without having to sneak around. Can't wait to just be us. And that was it. The line I couldn't let her cross. I didn't know exactly how I would do it yet, but I knew the confrontation was coming. And once I opened that door, there would be no going back. The morning after she left for that so-called work conference in Norfolk, I woke up to silence. Not the comfortable silence of a lazy Saturday morning, with coffee brewing and Murphy snoring at the foot of the bed. This silence felt oppressive, heavy, like the house itself knew what was happening. I stood in the kitchen staring at the untouched second coffee mug I'd placed out of habit, and it hit me that she was probably sipping lattes with him in some hotel lobby 2 hours away, while I stood there like an idiot, holding on to a life that didn't exist anymore. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't just snap your heart in half. It seeps into every corner of your existence. It poisons the routines, the rituals, the tiny comforts you once took for granted. That Saturday I couldn't even bring myself to take Murphy on our usual morning walk through Bird Park. Every corner, every bench, every dog we passed had some memory tied to Emily, and all I could think was, which of those moments had been real, and which were just the scenery she used to mask her lies. I spent most of that weekend pacing, checking the hidden phone obsessively, like some addict. Every buzz of a notification made my stomach drop. I told myself I was gathering proof, but really I was just torturing myself. Every "I miss you," every heart emoji, every snapshot of their weekend together was another nail in the coffin of my sanity. I remember reading one message where she wrote, "This feels more like home than my real home does." That line nearly gutted me. By Sunday night, when I knew she'd be driving back, I was in this surreal headspace, half devastated, half eerily calm. I had already decided I couldn't keep living in limbo. The confrontation was inevitable. I kept rehearsing it in my head, imagining all the different ways it could go. Maybe she'd deny it. Maybe she'd cry and confess. Maybe she'd pack a bag and leave that very night. None of the scenarios felt real, but they all terrified me. When she finally walked through the door around 8 p.m., suitcase in hand, wearing that same smile she always wore after trips, I swear time slowed. Murphy bolted to her, tail wagging, and she knelt to scratch his ears like nothing was wrong, like she hadn't just spent 48 hours wrapped up in someone else's arms. I stood there in the doorway of the kitchen, watching her, and something inside me snapped. I didn't pull the phone out right away. Instead, I asked her about her conference, keeping my voice steady, almost too casual. She launched into some rehearsed spiel about presentations and networking dinners. I nodded along, heart pounding in my ear. Then I asked her which hotel she stayed at. She hesitated, just a fraction of a second, but enough. That was when I pulled the hidden phone from behind my back and set it on the counter. The color drained from her face. Instantly, she didn't even try to play dumb. She just froze, like a deer in headlights, her mouth opening but no sound coming out. In that silence, everything between us unraveled. She started crying, stammering something about how she never meant for it to get this far, how she was confused, how she loved me but also had feelings for him. I barely heard her. My ears were ringing. My chest felt like it might cave in. All I could think was how many times she had lied to my face while looking me straight in the eye. The argument stretched for hours, her begging, me demanding answers, her offering half-truths.
That only made things worse. She admitted it had started during the pandemic, that it was supposed to be just a distraction, that she hadn't expected it to turn into an affair. She said she still loved me, that she wanted to work through this, but her words felt hollow, scripted, like lines she'd rehearsed in the mirror. By the time she finally fell asleep on the couch, face streaked with tears, I sat alone in the kitchen staring at the phone on the counter. My mind was numb, but underneath the numbness was this deep raw ache I can't even put into words. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the death of the life I thought I had. The fallout spread quickly in the days that followed. At work I was a mess. I'd sit at my desk staring at code I couldn't make sense of, fingers hovering over the keyboard, brain fogged by sleepless nights. My boss noticed. Colleagues asked if I was okay, and I lied through my teeth, saying I was just burned out. The truth felt too humiliating to admit. With friends I withdrew. The guys would text about grabbing beers, watching the game, and I'd make excuses. I couldn't stomach sitting in a bar, pretending everything was fine, when my entire world was crumbling. Even with my family, I pulled away. My mom called one Sunday, cheerful as always, asking about Emily, and I muttered some vague response, before quickly changing the subject. I wasn't ready for their pity, their advice, their inevitable "we never liked her anyway" comments. At home the air was thick with tension. Emily kept trying, making dinner, suggesting we go for walks, talking about couples therapy. Part of me wanted to slam the door and never look back. Another part, the weaker part maybe, clung to the familiarity. After all, this was nearly a decade of my life. You don't just erase that overnight. But every time I looked at her, I saw the messages. Every time she touched me, I wondered if she was imagining him. Even in moments when we tried to talk calmly, the image of that phone sat like a shadow between us. The nights were the worst. I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, mind replaying every detail of the past few years, the lies she told, the excuses she made. I'd remember the night in July, when she came home smelling like cologne, the weekends she claimed she had team building, of the afternoons she said she was running errands, but came back hours later with nothing but a half-hearted smile. All the puzzle pieces clicked into place, forming a picture I wished I could unsee. I started spiraling. I drank more, scrolling through those messages late into the night like some kind of masochist, feeding my pain with every word. I stopped going to the gym, stopped cooking, stopped caring. Murphy became my only anchor. Walking him was the one thing that forced me out of bed, out of the house, into the sunlight. Some mornings when the weight of it all felt unbearable, his wagging tail and goofy smile were the only reasons I kept moving. Weeks blurred into months. October slipped into November. Then December. Holidays came and went like shadows. Thanksgiving was awkward. We went to her parents' house, pretending everything was fine, smiling for pictures, while I silently wondered if they knew. Christmas was worse. We put up a tree, exchanged gifts, but beneath the wrapping paper and fake cheer, there was this hollow emptiness. She gave me a leather jacket I'd wanted for years, and I thanked her. But inside I thought, how can you give me something so thoughtful while giving your heart to someone else? My mental health tanked. Anxiety gnawed at me constantly. Depression pulled me down like quicksand. I'd wake up with a knot in my chest, dreading the day. I couldn't focus, couldn't find joy in anything. I thought about leaving more times than I can count. But then fear would creep in. Fear of starting over at 36. Fear of losing everything we'd built. Fear of admitting failure. But the truth is, I had already lost it. The fallout wasn't just emotional. It was physical, tangible. Our relationship was a corpse, and we were just propping it up, hoping no one would notice the smell. The turning point came one night in late January 20. I was sitting on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, sipping whiskey, watching my breath cloud in the cold air. Emily came outside, sat beside me, and for a long time we just sat in silence. Then she said, softly, "I don't think we can fix this, can we?" For once I didn't argue. I just shook my head, and in that moment, something shifted. The fallout wasn't just about what she had done to me anymore. It was about what I was going to do next. The next morning I started looking at apartments online.
When the dust of betrayal settled around me, something inside me shifted forever. It wasn't an overnight transformation. At first, I still carried the weight of heartbreak like a chain dragging behind me. The betrayal still stung in the quiet hours of the night, and I would sometimes wake up sweating, replaying the same scenes in my head. The lies, the excuses, the image of them together while I sat at home believing her words. But slowly, as weeks rolled into months, that sting began to harden into something else. It became fuel. I realized that I had two choices. Let this betrayal define me as the broken, abandoned man who was left behind, or let it become the spark that pushed me into a life where I was untouchable. And for the first time in my life, I chose myself. The first thing I did was brutally cut ties, not just with her, but with every person, place, and memory that tied me to that chapter. I changed my number. I moved apartments. I deleted every picture, every memento, not out of spite, but because I couldn't rebuild my future in a house still haunted by ghosts. I needed a fresh canvas, and I was finally brave enough to start painting on it. I poured myself into work in a way I never had before. Every ounce of pain became determination. Every lonely night became an opportunity to sharpen my skills, to learn, to grow, to rise. I started waking up at 5 in the morning, hitting the gym before most people even rolled out of bed. I channeled the anger into iron, lifting, running, pushing myself, until sweat burned away the bitterness. With every rep, I wasn't just building muscle, I was building resilience. At work, I stopped holding back. Before, I had been cautious, humble, waiting for opportunities. Now, I created. I pitched bold ideas, took risks others were afraid of, volunteered for the hardest projects, and refused to let fear dictate my path. People began to notice. My bosses began to notice. And within a year, I had risen higher than I ever imagined. The paychecks grew. The respect multiplied. And with it, so did my confidence. But the real turning point wasn't money or titles. It was the way I began to see myself. For the first time in my life, I stopped seeking validation from someone else's love. I stopped waiting for a partner to complete me. I realized that I had been whole all along. Her betrayal hadn't destroyed me. It had revealed me. Ironically, as I began to thrive, she began to circle back. It started with small things. An old mutual friend mentioning that she had asked about me. A random text from an unknown number that I instantly recognized as hers. Vague and testing the waters. "Hey, just wanted to see how you're doing." I didn't reply, not out of cruelty but because silence was the loudest answer I could give. The more I grew, the more her presence became irrelevant. I heard through the grapevine that her vacation romance had fizzled out after a year, that she was bouncing between jobs, that life wasn't quite as picture-perfect as she had hoped. Meanwhile, my world was expanding in ways I never thought possible. I traveled, really traveled, not like her fake excuse of needing space. I saw new cities, met new people, tasted new foods, experienced cultures that humbled and inspired me. Every trip felt like reclaiming the time she had stolen from me. And in those travels, I met people who genuinely cared, who valued me not for what I could give them but for who I was. I formed friendships that were deeper, truer, and more lasting than the shallow love I once thought was everything. One night, about 2 years after it all began, I ran into her by accident. It was at a cafe downtown, one I used to avoid because I knew it had been our spot. I walked in without thinking, and there she was, sitting alone, staring into a half-finished cup of coffee. She looked up, and for a brief moment, her face lit up like it used to. But then her eyes flickered with something else. Regret, maybe shame, maybe longing. We exchanged polite words. She asked about my life, and I told her the truth. That I was doing better than ever. That I was building something I was proud of. That I was happy, and it wasn't a performance. I truly was. She, on the other hand, stumbled through vague answers. She admitted that things hadn't worked out the way she had expected, that taking time for herself hadn't brought her the happiness she thought it would, that she sometimes missed what we had. In that moment, I realized just how far I had come. 2 years earlier, I would have given anything to hear her say she missed me, but standing there, watching her fumble through excuses, I felt nothing. No desire, no longing, no hate, just a calm indifference, because the truth was, I no longer needed her to validate my worth. I had turned the tables, not by revenge, not by proving her wrong, but by proving myself right, by choosing myself when she chose someone else, by rising when she expected me to crumble, by living a life so full and so free that her betrayal became nothing more than a faded scar. That was my victory. Not that she regretted leaving, but that I no longer cared that she did. And as I walked out of that cafe, leaving her behind once and for all, I knew I had finally won. When I walked out of that cafe and left her sitting there with her half-empty cup of coffee, I felt a strange kind of peace settle over me. Not the fiery, triumphant kind of victory I once imagined I would feel if I ever faced her again, but something gentler, quieter, deep. It was the peace of knowing that I had finally untangled myself from her shadow. For so long I thought my story was about her, about how she betrayed me, how she walked away, how she left me to pick up the broken pieces of a life we were supposed to share. But as I moved forward, I began to realize that the story wasn't hers at all. It was mine. She was just a chapter, not the whole book. In the months after that encounter, I found myself reflecting more than ever, not in the obsessive, painful way I had in the beginning, but in a way that helped me make sense of the journey. I could finally see the arc clearly. How her betrayal had dragged me to the lowest point of my life, and how that same pain had forced me to rise higher than I ever thought possible. Without her leaving, maybe I would have stayed stuck in a comfortable but unfulfilled life. Without the heartbreak, maybe I would never have discovered my own strength. I realized that resolution wasn't about revenge, or about proving her wrong. It wasn't about watching her stumble while I soared. True resolution was about letting go, completely, about forgiving, not for her sake, but for mine, about closing the book and placing it on the shelf, knowing I would never have to read that chapter again. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine and allowed myself to think of her one last time, not with anger, not with longing, but with acceptance. She had been a part of my life, a teacher in her own cruel way. She had taught me what I would never again tolerate, what I truly deserved, and most importantly, how to choose myself. I whispered a quiet goodbye into the fading light, not the desperate goodbye of someone who still clings to hope, but the firm, steady goodbye of someone who has finally found peace. And with that, I began the next chapter. I started to live more deliberately, more fully. I stopped postponing. I signed up for classes I had always talked about taking. I poured my creativity into projects I had once been too scared to try. I traveled not to escape, but to expand. Every new experience felt like adding color to a canvas that had once been gray. And then, without even realizing it, I found love again, not the kind of reckless, desperate love I once mistook for destiny, but something deeper, steadier, kinder. It came quietly, without fireworks or dramatic twists of fate. It grew out of shared conversations, laughter, patience, and mutual respect. It wasn't about filling a void, because by then I had already filled it myself. It was about two whole people choosing to walk side by side, not leaning on each other to stand. And for the first time, I understood what real love felt like. Looking back now, I don't hate her. I don't even resent her. She made her choices, and they led her down a path different from mine. Maybe she regrets them, maybe she doesn't, but that's no longer my concern.
My life is no longer tethered to hers in any way. My resolution came not in watching her fail, but in building a life so rich, so fulfilling, so true to myself, that her betrayal became irrelevant. I used to think the worst day of my life was the day I found out the truth, the day I realized she had lied, that she had taken her time alone not to heal, but to betray. But now I know that day was also the best day of my life, because it broke me open in a way that allowed me to rebuild into someone stronger, wiser and freer than I ever imagined. That's the paradox of pain. It feels like destruction, but sometimes it's rebirth. And so my story ends not with bitterness, not with regret, but with gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons, for the strength, for the second chance at a life I truly deserve. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: sometimes the people who shatter us are the very ones who set us free. And in that freedom, I found myself.